Good evening, everyone. Welcome.
Good evening.
My name is Nate Klug, and I have the honor of introducing these two wonderful poets who are going to read for us tonight. Liza Hudock is going to read first, and then Weijia Pan. And so I'll just give an introduction of both poets, and then you'll get to hear from them. So I've been reading both books in the last few weeks, and really wonderful to read poets who both attend so faithfully to place, whether Nanjing or Shanghai, in the case of Weijia, or Detroit, Michigan, in the case of Liza. Both poets who attend carefully to language and dialect, and the old question of what to make of our dead, our ancestors, and those who have more recently left the earth. Liza Hudock's is it Reveille or Reveille?
It's Reveille.
Reveille.
Yeah.
I'm glad I asked you right now. Liza Hudock's Reveille is a book that begins with clay and ends with fire. Her poems are full of unexpected jumps, from observation to memory or personal experience. Her tone is full of humor, often dark humor, and Reveille, I had to look it up. It denotes a daily military bugle call, maybe other things too. But this one definition, at least, is to signal the start of a day, to wake personnel and accompany a flag raising. And in the same way, I thought Hudock's poems summon the stubborn particulars of behavior of people we've loved and lost, a mother, a sister in particular. Hudock risks simple, plain-spoken lines. Quote, "Once you texted me a line of poetry. It wasn't one of the big ones. It was the kind of line I like." In another poem about her last name, she writes, "I sing the song of the first unlucky person." Written to her brother in prison, the poem ends in a heartbreaking way, imagining a turkey feather. Quote, "In the morning I will search the ground around the tree. If I find a feather, I will cut the plume and thread it through the clear, hollow bone, that I might have a brush. I will pick a pumpkin and scoop out the pulp, that I might have an ink pot. I will write Dear Alex on a living leaf, that the letters might bind wretchedness to grace, as yolk binds pigment to a cedar board." So that's just some of the beautiful poetry that you're about to hear. Can I invite you to read first, and then I'll introduce Weijia? Okay, so please welcome Liza Hudock.
Thanks for the introduction, Nate. James, thank you for organizing this and having me here. As Nate mentioned, these are mostly elegies for my mom and my youngest sister. For tonight, I'm just going to focus on some of the elegies that I wrote for my sister. Behold the shoes. Behold the shoes in the doorway. Black canvas sneakers coated in black kitchen grease. Long laces, too many eyelets, and curly soles. The shoes are clownish and quite new. But the grease gives them an accelerated version of the patina people covet in leather chairs and brass doorknobs. So they look more like shoes retrieved from the Titanic, symbols of the transience of human flesh, of hubris and consequence, of a brand of optimism that mostly feels ridiculous. Victorian shoes that, because of the tannin in their leather, endure in perfect condition on the ocean floor, while iron wreckage, flesh, and bone all dissolve. More like those than shoes a girl kicked off a few days ago for the last time. My ability to persist a little longer feels inherent too. It's in my makeup, nothing to do with force of will. I persist like a shoe, maybe unlikely as a shoe too. I won't touch the shoes in the doorway. If anything, I want to avert my gaze. So pure is the air around the shoes. Welcome, Georgia. I was like, who is walking in here right now? She's allowed. My dead folks know they're dead. They don't come to me lost. They don't come to me angry. They don't even ask me for money. They don't bang down doors or shake me with cold hands in June. So no, I don't sleep on top of my money anymore. And yes, I call this a form of freedom. Like a tulip, my freedom comes fastened to the buried fist that feeds it, or the leaf that nourishes the fist. This thing that haunts me now would barely pass as a ghost, more like a fragment or an aberration of light. White wisp in the corner of my eye. I try to look at it directly, and it's gone. I try to make it stay in my periphery, and it vanishes then, too. And I was the one called a greased weasel by Maddie. I get away with everything. She always got caught. And maybe she was right if I'm still here. Mind worming away at things. Certain only of the first thing that I said. The way I know the hard bulb by its tulip. Froggy embrace. This thing cool and thrumming, like a frog between my palms, is the dream where you get to where you're going and say what you want to say. When I'm in the dream, I never make it to the end, and when awake, I go to open my hands. Nothing is there. In the dream, I walk up the driveway and see through the kitchen window Maddie washing dishes. She looks up and mean mugs me in her kidding way. At this point, I almost get to speak. Okay. Bookmark. The prayer card shows Mary as the mystical rose, backlit and shoeless, on some promontory, with blooms around her and one stemless pink rosette atop each foot. She wears her star crown, white robes, and blue sash. But it's the foot roses that interest me, as if a woman could be so precariously adorned and still walk. I used the card as a bookmark, then forgot about the book. Something about sanctity amid sorrow, said the woman who gave me the card. I was half listening. It had been a bad morning, and the stove broke in the afternoon. And you, instead of digging out the hot plate or cooking outside, took our bowl of peeled and cubed potatoes and went to the laundry room. You opened the sliding door to the closet that hid the furnace, and perfectly solemn and straight-faced, we weren't even drunk, you held just one cube to the small blue pilot flame, the fire in the house I knew was there but had forgotten. That's how it was with the card. Sorrow heaped at Mary's feet, and sanctity that pricked, suddenly there, in a book I had put down for a long time. Let me get a sip of my water. Thanks, Andrea. Funeral for a cook. In the event you come up for inspection, I lay the altar with garlic and an onion. If there is a stream of souls that forks into good and bad, I send you to it with the materials of your work. In case some minor demon makes a quick assessment of all your evil deeds against the good, I lay the altar with the garlic and onions you sliced and fried. Sometimes the knife slipped. You cut your fingers and stabbed your palms. You grabbed hot pans daydreaming. Your wrists were lined with red scars from the oven's opening. I want to believe in the preservation of consciousness. I lay the altar so you might think, if you are ever to be judged, to roll up your sleeves. Hold your hands out, and I promise never to tell you what to do again. Hold your hands out. Palms up, palms down. See, I was a servant. This is called After the Gold Leaves from Pelena. It's about grave that was excavated. Does anyone know about this grave? And there was like, I don't know. There, like, gold leaves were part of a funerary rites of the body that had been excavated. And there's words on the gold leaves. Okay. After the gold leaves from Pelena. You had skin as I do, like Pan's upper half. And part of you was bound within a sleek, quivering pelt. Like a lamb you bleated after mother's milk. You were fattened like a calf and dragged by your weakest spot. Like a bull you were pierced with a gold handle. People said you had a bad temper. Like a bull sometimes you were a prodded, raging spectacle. I wonder if I ever could have reasoned with a creature like Pan. If you were ever once touched tenderly. If tenderness was what you were looking for. 2. It sounds like death is a return to love. You leap and rush into the milk of it. It cannot be a cold love, as a mother's love can be, as cold as we now know the universe to be. It must be a new love, the warm love of an animal never seen. Okay. I'm just going to do 2 more. Tansy. A bog full of it, and no one else around. Star cluster blooms, joy yellow, each blossom a glowing dome like E.T.'s finger. Perhaps being a plant, tansy can indicate home without attachment. Unlike E.T., unlike me. And yet the wormwood bitter taste, and yet the flowers smell. Multiple, remedial, sweet, wooden, old-fashioned salve. Last night I dreamed Maddie was a ball of light. In a light ball's speechless manner, she expressed herself to me. The dream got silly when the other burning balls conveyed that they were cats and dogs. But still, it was a nice dream, full of love. Reveille. You died 4 months ago, and the sparrows still remember you. All I have to do is show them the copper pot you used to fill with water to fling at their bush, for their manic chirping to cease. Was the silence familiar when it first closed over your ears? When you exceeded your body, as a flood exceeds the river, you were everywhere. When a flood recedes, the ground looks unfamiliar. Everything is out of place, and all the witnesses can say is this is where the water was. Once you texted me a line of poetry. It wasn't one of the big ones. It was the kind of line I like, the record of a life. And I have sat and watched the trees. Thank you.
That was really great, Liza. Thank you. So, Weijia Pan's Motherlands is a book that might be described, I think I've heard him describe it as love letters to 2 cities, Nanjing and Shanghai, and the family who lived there. This is a poet who is aware of history of politics in China and poets in China and the history of poetry, making use of that history. A poem in the collection called The Peasantry is addressed to Mao Zedong, the revolutionary, who also, of course, wrote lots of poems. In a poem referring to the ancient practice of sprinkling pepper on a road, Weijia Pan writes, quote, "They used to sprinkle the path with pepper so that it smelled good, assuring. Now they use pepper for a different purpose." In what I think is a virtuoso poem to survive the summer, Pan builds a map of literary ancestors, Oiken-Zaburo, Karamazov, Transtromer. The poem ends in this moment of force, which is also maybe a moment of vocation. Quote, "An invisible hand grabs my shoulders to say, 'Are you Weijia? Something happened. Come this way.'" Wherever he finds himself, Weijia Pan is attentive to particulars, piano music. There's lots of great poems about music in this collection. Garlic, which I think both poets are concerned with a little bit. Quote, the sound of water, the smell of anxiety in urine. At the end of the book, he admits, quote, in this poem, I wonder if I should even appear. In a book so attentive to ancestors, it's a question that is profound and makes sense. Will you join me in welcoming Weijia Pan?
Thank you, Nate, for the introduction, and thanks, Liza, for reading with me, and thanks, James, for organizing all of this. Is this loud enough? Yes, I'm going to start with the poem that you just mentioned, Pepper Path, which is a reference to the classical usage of pepper, like they sprinkle pepper on newly paved road for good fortunes. And yes, this is the first poem in this collection. And the epigraph to the poem refers to a poem by the 3rd century poet and prince Cao Zhi, Pepper Path. She walks the heady perfume of pepper-scented rose, strides through clumps of spikenard, scattering their fragrance, from the goddess of the law by Cao Zhi. They used to sprinkle the path with pepper so that it smelled good, assuring that it was firm, straight, a good will, that no one who ever trod on it would walk awry, a dream. It was good to dream dreams in 3rd century China, when bronze pigeons floated around. Literati woke up to find food on the table. They smoked herbs to get high. Now they use pepper for a different purpose. When we, the literati, gathered, they, the barbarians, pepper us. Those pepper seeds grown in the warmth of South America, distilled, capsaicin, assassin. A pepper path where another pepper tree grows solid, shielding up the soul from anti-riot vehicles. And the next one's called Poem to Survive the Summer. It's basically a personal reading journey where I make reference to a lot of the poets and writers and artists that I've really loved. Poem to Survive the Summer. Boy Kenzaburo wrote, Summer, Death by Water. He was referring to the hot Tokyo nights. Even the ducks couldn't sleep. At morning, 4 Karamazovs rustled in bed, thinking of money or the future of Russia. Bach, a smoke creek in German, circling back to itself like strings lengthening into willows when I sit down at my piano. A nearby lake smoothes them back to say, hold on, my child, hold on. But the lake freezes in winter and doesn't return my calls. In summer, I write 2 lines at a time, 2 vine souls running up a wall. At Romaro, Transformer strikes a chord, carrying Schubert into the blue of his cabin. Summer is the time of revolutions. June 1966, China was a sea of books. France followed. In 1989, people were busy covering bullet holes in Tiananmen as Gorbachev ran back to his cracking union. Summer sings the tune of birth and destruction. Van Gogh died on a summer morning. The apples of overs, filmed with sweetness. Walter Benjamin was a child of summer, but the Spanish water smelled like rats and gunpowder. Even Rimbaud, the youngest of them all, squandered away his summer, his amputated leg lying beside him. When I think of summer, all the events come to life like a childhood shadow play. There's my father biking me to school, my mother knitting in the sun, competing with God to cover my limbs, my great-grandfather, middle-aged, spectacled, smelling like salt, etching away at the photo. He was missing in summer 1949. His whereabouts even the Red Guards couldn't figure out. When I write about him, all the summers walk in file. Then I lie awake, knowing it is my time to rest, like a child filling a bowl to the brim with every expectation of getting more. But an invisible hand grabs my shoulders to say, are you Weijia? Something happened. Come this way. So this is a poem, still a poem about my interest in classical music, references to ancestry, but also bringing back to my experiences in America. And the title comes from a composition by this Hungarian composer Franz Liszt. Étude en musique exercice S136. In Liszt, I hear an old man stumbling across the fields to meet me. He starves to save bits of bread from my pocket. My own grandpa is different in a senior home in Shanghai. He's polite, asking about my age and name and marriage and age. Timestamp, which means that time keeps its own records, like a metronome, or a fountain booming every 25 seconds. Unlike the skyline that fades when the clouds loom large, a flock of your imagination dropping on the book's dead pages. In the early 19th century, Japanese samurais from the south would gather every spring to discuss insurrection. Now, they would say finally. It was 1868. The Americans were banging on the door, and the last shogun, a bony young man, would wisely concede. Being an introvert, I concede every day to my own messiness. I read in my study. I love the fact that you're out there, reader. But glad you were not here is not what a poet should tell another poet. As if to imagine the world, you should only write about selfhood, the feather of birds on parchment, and cold 13th century nights. How destructive were Stalin's pencils, marking blue crosses and ticks on death warrants, a color not visible when photographed. He started off as a poet, a job I now have. I remember another poet in Flushing, New York, who told me that I shouldn't let my poems end too easily. How I'd always despised him a little, yet accepted when he rummaged for cash and broken English, a fatherly way to say, stay alive and goodbye. Okay. And we mentioned peasantry, a poem in conversation with an imagined peasant, and also as a kind of commentary on Mao's policies and how it's being different in contemporary China. So I'm going to read that one. The peasantry. The people and the people alone are the motive force of world history, from Mao Zedong on coalition government. I found you more difficult to work with, which, as I was told, is pretty much how you think of me. I could smell the fertilizers on your skin. You could smell the skinflint on my hands. I could read history from the back of a reddened skull. You could read me directly, reflected in the eyes of passers-by. I eat porridge, you eat porridge. I apologize to my guests for my lack of hospitality. You apologize to tax collectors for the lack of produce. I think I've heard wars will rage to raise your standard of living. You think standard of living is ludicrous. I think even the communists betrayed you. You agree and go back to tilling your field. I hate that your face is a mishmash of bones. As a child, I pointed fingers at you. When I went to see the beautiful countryside, I admired and avoided you. When I zoomed in on the rice paddies, I feared you would emerge from them. I feared you would blame me for not thinking long enough of you. Then I think for you. That's not that easy. You prefer to think about cows and children, so they don't have to think about cows and children. But I always fall back to thinking about you, and you will have to learn to become we. When we finally organize ourselves, even the masters in the city will invite us to tea. And the next one's a poem called Motherhood. Motherhood. The scar of coffee on the napkin is a painting. Beside my table in a New York coffee shop, a man talks into his cell phone. His Spanish, almost indiscernible, is beautiful. But the woman across from him is beautiful in some other way. Being older, she expects attention while sitting upright. The sun dims. The man talks about the past of talking and not responding. while the woman counts the buttons on her coat. On this day, you wouldn't expect much from this world. Someone talks into a cell phone and leaves. Someone stares into the windows to see herself more clearly. When the first man walks up to the counter, the woman he's with looks up, with pain I can imagine, shivers, and rests her stare on me like reaching for shore. Later, the barista wipes their table, and they never return, leaving me there like a sun, trying to anchor the face of my own mother. So I'm going to do a last poem from this collection, and I'll end with a poem, a new poem. So I'm a translator I translate from Chinese to English, and a lot of times I work with poets who are very hands-on, and they insist on working with me on like word choice, and occasionally I got into like this kind of back and forth with poets, and being a poet myself, I'm more used to having more liberty in my translation than doing it in a more academic, like word-for-word way. So this is a poem like partly inspired by my frustration as a translator. Betrayal, or when a poet translates another poet. I walk fitfully into the moon of silence, aspirant. The moon fitfully aspires to walk into my silence. Silence my moon into the aspirant walk fitfully. With fitfulness, the moon walks silently, and I. Doubly fitful into me walks silence, the moon. Triple the moon, mine, in silence to walk. Walk silently, the moon fitfully to me, aspirant. Aspiring to walk silently, I fitfully, and aspiring silences fitfulness, I walk into the moon. To me, the silent moon in and of itself, on the path of aspirants, a fitful silence walks over me. The moon forks, all aspirants in frightful silence. Two aspirant pieces, under silence, walk fittingly. So I could have ended with that poem, but I decided to end with something that's perhaps a little bit more pessimistic in response to more contemporary events, I guess. War as the past and the future. What can I tell you, child, about the war? In the year of the horse, when all cars turned electric, the president announced the war against books. Father brought me on a ride to his new apartment. He said, "There's a deep class divide in this country." And then, "This is life." I sat in the lobby and my time's up. His breath smelled of iron. I watched him wrestle with his car, and after 3 McDonald's, we stopped for a cigarette. Back then, I didn't know life would be so lonely. At night, I read my copy of selected Tom poems, and one by one, the characters started illuminating themselves. It was coughing season. A mother locked herself in the upstairs room. Cicadas crawled on the sidewalk, as if saying, "We're here," on this hot summer day, the coolest of summers to come. And how I've come, hugging my pillow like a belief. I made my lunch, went to school, hoping the translations that had flowered on my desk could cure my mother's reticence. I thought there was a solution to grown-ups' problems. She didn't open the door. I came back to myself without asking. Thank you.
you, Liza. Thank you, Weijia, for a beautiful reading tonight. Let's give them another round of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you to Nate for hosting and for the wonderful introductions. Let's give Nate a round of applause. Thank you, Nate. Thank you. And thanks to all of you who attended in person. Thanks to everyone on Zoom. We have some books for sale. Poets will be signing books. If everyone would please put their chairs up against one of the walls, I'd be very grateful. Thank you very much.